At this point, all these base rail or side rail welds are done where the cross members meet this side rail. They're all done on both sides of each joint. So the next step will be to flip this over 180 and do the same thing on the other end of each cross member. But before I do that, I'm going to cut and weld an end cap for this tube here and its counterpart at the other end of the long rail. Okay, so for this end cap, I actually want it to sit slightly inside the tube so it doesn't stand proud of this corner when I weld it in there. I actually just want it to look like it's part of the tube. So I'm going to cut it to fit the interior dimensions, which, because it's 1/8 wall tubing, it's 1/4 inch under. So it's going to be 3/4 of an inch in this direction, and then 1 3/4 inch in this direction. So I'm just setting up to cut the caps. I have this piece of 1/8 inch sheet, steel sheet, left over from another project. I usually buy this stuff as remnants, and I usually buy it in widths that will fit my saw. And this is a Makita cold cut saw, they call it. I believe that's, or dry cut, sorry, cold cut. I'm thinking about lunch, I guess. But it's a dry cut saw, meaning that it doesn't need to spray lubrication onto the steel when it's cutting it, as you see with a lot of band saws. So it just uses a carbide tipped blade, and just a common blade you can buy, pretty easily from a number of vendors. This is not the original blade, and it works like a miter saw for wood, but it cuts metal because the motor moves at a slower speed, and the blades are designed to cut ferrous materials like steel. And I have this saw mounted on the end of my welding table. It's a 3 foot by, I think, 5 foot table, and I just built it. I purchased the top and then welded up a cart for it to sit on. And then these drawers are an old Harbor Freight mechanics cart, 4-drawer mechanics cart that I just pirated the drawer unit out of and mounted in there. Kind of designed it around that. And it works pretty well. So it's a good sturdy welding table. It's on casters, but I have lengths of threaded rod here at the bottom that I can screw down into position to lift the caster slightly off the floor and steady the table. And then I built it so that the saw is at the same height as the welding table surface. It's actually adjustable so that if I ever mount a different piece of equipment in here, I could level it out. So I have, you probably can't see it, but I built some screw jacks right under here that bear against the platform the saw is actually mounted on. And then I have a material support that slides out down here. Show that real quick. Basically unscrew these hand wheels, and then this material support, trust me, it really does slide out, slides out, so it can hold, it can support lengthy materials that are being cut on the saw. And this is the saw that I used to cut the 10-foot lengths of tubing I purchased for this project down to the target sizes. So it's a pretty handy tool. You could do the same thing with an abrasive cutoff saw, but they are a lot messier, frankly, because they just kind of burn their way through the steel, and they throw off a lot of grit and dust, and then the tubes or whatever steel you're cutting requires more extensive deburring and prep before welding, whereas the cuts this saw makes are pretty clean. So this is piece of 1/8 inch steel. I had some layout fluid on it from my last project, so I just scribed my cut line here for these caps. So I'm cutting it at 3/4 of an inch, and then once I have a 3/4 inch strip, I can just cut it in the proper lengths for the end of each tube. I need to make 4. Okay, so there's the first cap fitted to the end of the tube, and just basically involves cutting a rectangular piece of steel to size, and then tuning the corners a little bit. They have to be rounded, and fits right in there. And then I'll just use a magnet to secure it in place for welding. So throw a magnet up there. That ensures it's held flush with the end of the tube and won't be disturbed when I start throwing some tacks down on it. It'll be nicely flush to the end of the tube. Okay, so there's the cap welded in and ground down a bit. The main purpose of this is to prevent dirt and water intrusion, so it's not really about cosmetics. That's why I've just grounded a little bit to make sure it's smooth, and that's good enough because the exterior walls of the camper will hang down just past this tubing, so none of this will be visible in the finished camper. So like I said, it's really just here to plug the end of the tube to keep dirt and water out of there, and to help prevent rust and corrosion. So there you go.